First, a breaking development to bring you from the last few moments. The Kremlin says Russia will cease all hostilities from the evening of the 19th until the 21st of April. In a statement, it said it assumes the Ukrainian side to, quote, follow its example, adding that Ukraine's actions during the ceasefire will show Kyiv's readiness for a peaceful settlement. President Vladimir Putin said Russian troops, meanwhile, must remain ready to repel possible violations of the truce by Ukraine, and that instructions have been given to commanders in the Special Military Operations Zone regarding the ceasefire.
Today, on the eve of Easter, I would like to congratulate, first of all, the military personnel who profess Christianity, Orthodoxy, and fight for Russia on this bright holiday. I would like to congratulate everyone in our country and in the world who celebrates the coming day, honors and respects it. Guided by humanitarian considerations, today from 6 p.m. to midnight, from Sunday to Monday, the Russian side declares an Easter truce. I order all military actions to cease for this period. We assume that the Ukrainian side will follow our example. At the same time, our troops must be ready to repel possible violations of the truce and provocations from the enemy, any of its aggressive actions.
Well, our international affairs commentator Doug Herbert joins me now on set. So, Doug, a surprise announcement of an Easter truce. What do we make of this?
Let's translate that, what we just heard. This has all of the hallmarks of the most classic Kremlin propaganda operation. And here we are. We're all sitting on it talking about a truce, a ceasefire. Let's all but applauding Putin for this. Look, and for an added dollop of cynicism couched in humanitarian considerations. Look, let's be very clear here what this is. This is a very well orchestrated, the Kremlin is very good at doing this, a well orchestrated PR operation, a propaganda operation aimed directly at the Trump administration at a time when the Trump administration has been blowing hot and cold on the Ukraine talks and its participation in them, and insinuating that he might just walk away from those talks, that is Trump. This is a way for Putin to do several things all at once in one announcement, as we just heard, with his slightly comatose-looking chief of staff sitting across from him at that Kremlin table. First of all, Putin makes himself look like the peacemaker here. Putin is the good person. On Easter, the man of goodwill, the man who wants to set the good example, up against evil, awful Ukraine, which has done nothing but violate the truce. Going into this, I'll note that the Putin accused Ukraine of violating the ceasefire against energy infrastructure more than 100 times in the past month. So Putin, the good guy. Putin, the peacemaker, in contrast to Ukraine that does nothing but violate any term of any potential peace or ceasefire at every turn. Also, Putin, once again, knowing that Trump basically often his mood and his behavior will reflect the last person that spoke to him. You can expect, almost on cue in Washington, you will start to hear considerations of praise for Putin for stepping up to the plate, for announcing this. Putin taking that first step to show goodwill. Now it's incumbent on Ukraine to follow suit, as he's made it clear. I'll say one of the reasons that you can be relatively, and more than relatively, suspicious of this announcement is even as he declared this Easter truce on humanitarian grounds for humanitarian considerations, he also gave the instructions to his commanders, or rather Valery Gerasimov, his chief of general command, gave instructions to the commanders of the so-called special military operation. Yes, they still call it that. They still don't call it a war. Gave instructions to the commanders in the field to be ready to repel any Ukrainian violations of the truce. So even as they declare a ceasefire, they are psychologically setting everyone up for inevitably what's going to come, a Ukrainian violation of the truce. And remember, a Ukrainian violation of the truce does not have to reflect the facts on the ground of what's actually happening. The Ukrainian violation of the truce is whatever the Kremlin says is a violation of the truce. Once again, reverting back, this is the hallmark, I said, the trappings of a perfect Kremlin PR operation, throwing a bone to Putin, drawing perhaps, you can almost anticipate it. You can hear the response before it even happens. It's going to lead to a favorable response, praise for Putin and the Kremlin for showing goodwill, showing they still want to make this peace, this peace effort work. Now it will be incumbent on Zelensky to show good faith. And the ultimate crowning irony of this entire Easter truce. The crowning irony is, let us not forget that it was originally Ukraine, after its first talks with the United States almost a month ago now, which agreed to not a 30-hour truce and ceasefire, as is the current case here, but a 30-day ceasefire, a ceasefire which not only Russia dragged its feet and has not signed on to until now, an extended ceasefire, but one following which Russia has stepped up its attacks on civilian infrastructure, a wave of furious attacks, exploding drones, missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles in recent days and weeks, including that horrific recent attack on Sumy. We've seen it around all of the big regions it controls. I would say the timing, if you want to ask me about that, it's also perhaps not coincidental that this comes on a day that Russia says it has essentially ejected, this is according to the Russian spokespeople, the defense ministry has ejected Ukrainian troops from their last footholds in the Kursk region that Ukraine seized in its audacious incursion last August. It says the Russians now say they control about 1,260 square kilometers of that territory, which is about 99.5%. Once again, that's according to the Russian Defense Ministry. So coming at a time when Russia feels pretty confident, has a lot of strut in its step on the battlefield, so the perfect timing, in a sense, to be able to announce a goodwill, I say that in quotes, my own cynical quotes added, a goodwill ceasefire operation for the Easter holiday on humanitarian grounds. The good peacemaker Putin cares about the people, initiating a ceasefire, putting the ball right back in Zelensky's court, or making it look like the ball's in Zelensky's court, to now show his good faith. But the Kremlin being very much in a military posture still, ready to strike back against any potential violations of this truce declared by Putin. And once again, I have to stress it, the violations of the truce are not what the international community or reporters on the ground will say is a violation of the truce. It is what the Kremlin defines as a violation of the truce. For Putin, this announcement is only a win-win situation.
Continuing on what you just said a little earlier, so, why until the 21st of April? Why only 30 days when it comes to this particular truce?
Because he can paint this as an Easter truce, and he could also paint it as a truce in which he doesn't quite trust what the Ukrainians are going to do. He wants to sort of test the waters here. It's enough time to perhaps show the Trump administration that Putin, not Zelensky, is the person in whom you can, vest your faith and your trust as the person who really wants peace, who wants to see this conflict end, who wants a ceasefire, not Zelensky, who left to his own devices would only want this war to go on. And it's a limited duration. So it gives that window, a window of good faith, an opportunity for the Russians to play the peacemaker, for the rest of the world to react, for the White House to weigh in, and to once again, like I said, put the onus, 30 hours, a good period in which the news cycle now over the next 30 hours will be swinging back the onus now, because it's been framed in these terms by the Kremlin propaganda machine, the PR machine. It's been framed in the terms everyone's now going to be watching for the Ukrainians, signs of Ukrainians violating the truce. Putin has essentially defined the terms of what constitutes breaking the efforts to forge a peace in the war that he launched against Ukraine 3 years ago.
Now, Vladimir Putin says Russia has always been ready for negotiations and welcomes the desire of the United States, China, and other countries for a fair settlement on Ukraine. Obviously, Kyiv will have, something else to say to this, because they've repeatedly accused Moscow of stalling in the peace talks. So, given all of this, does Vladimir Putin truly believe that the world will look at Russia in a good light? I mean, could this be read as perhaps a message, an internal message, a domestic message?
I don't really think Vladimir Putin, he especially doesn't care what Europe thinks. He doesn't care what most of the Western community thinks. He does care to a limited extent what Donald Trump thinks, for better or for worse. He knows that Donald Trump, because he's said as much, at the end of the day, for the Kremlin, there's only one interlocutor when it comes to talking about Ukraine and the war there. And that is the United States and Donald Trump, for better or for worse. And Vladimir Putin knows very well, because he's met Donald Trump on many occasions. He's heard the statements from Donald Trump. He's been following, obviously, the ebb and flow of Donald Trump and the White House statements and seeing that growing impatience, the rhetoric of impatience coming from the White House, he knows exactly which buttons to press, how to press them at just the right time. This is the perfect type of thing right now to pump Trump back up and put him in a posture where, well, the last thing Vladimir Putin said was that he is announcing the Easter ceasefire. What have you been doing lately, Zelensky, to try to bring this war to the end? So in that sense right now, Putin will be looking to, and the Kremlin will be looking to see what the White House's reaction is going to be. And they probably have a good sense already that it's going to be a favorable reaction because it's, right, how do you oppose a truce? How do you say, well, it's a truce, but it's not a real truce. So look for a favorable reaction from the White House, maybe laced with a little bit, but obviously we'll be watching both sides closely, but I suspect more a reaction in favor, applauding Putin for showing good faith, for showing that he still wants a peace, and putting that ball very much back in Zelensky's course, because it's hardly a secret to much of the world that there's little love lost between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, even if right now Zelensky has had to, in many cases, at least kowtow to Trump more than he would have wanted if he really had his own way in this war. So it's a very, very tricky situation right now. We're going to be torn between headlines announcing a truce. I would almost put Easter truce in quotes in our caption there on the screen, but that's just me. But I would be very skeptical of the truce. Does it also mean that there might not be a genuine truce that might last 30 hours? Absolutely not. There could be a genuine truce where actually Russia does cease operations. But like I said, remember, watch Ukraine and watch the announcements regarding Ukraine. I can almost guarantee you that this is not a rollback of Vladimir Putin's ambitions. This is just a way to sort of pave the PR groundwork for what is going to come next. And that is right now finding out ways to progress on his basic demands, which have not changed, and this certainly doesn't change them, to drive NATO out of its Eastern European positions in Europe, to get Zelensky out of power, and to end this war on Russia's terms, which essentially mean full capitulation of the territory that Russia has illegally annexed in those 4 regions, plus Crimea. And I will just leave with the ending thought right now. As we go forward with these bids at ceasefires, those regions, those 4 regions that Russia has illegally annexed in southern and eastern Ukraine, with the exception of Luhansk in the northeast, with the exception of that region, none of them are fully controlled by Russia. There's still slithers of those territories, in some cases up to 20-25%, which are still controlled by the Ukrainians. And yet the terms of this ceasefire more and more look like they're creeping towards a U.S. concession. I'll use the word concession to Moscow, which would essentially leave them with the full territories, including the portions that are right now technically still under Ukrainian control.
Just lastly, if you will, Doug, you spoke of, Moscow hoping for a favorable reaction from Washington. What shape or form could this take? I mean, what does Vladimir Putin essentially want from the White House at this stage?
Yeah, well, what he wants from the White House is the sanctions lifted. He wants to basically play the game in a way that keeps Trump on his good side, keeps Trump basically opening the avenues of cooperation in business and the economy. Russia wants to essentially end its pariah status. It wants to be back in the game, and it knows it has an absolutely golden opportunity right now under a U.S. president who has shown time and again that he is very much inclined to sometimes, if not most of the time, favor Russia's reading and interpretation and talking points about how this war started and what is going to happen going forward. So, yeah, I think that's what he's looking for right now. He's looking for to basically shore up, make even stronger the foundation he's already built with Donald Trump, obviously in advancing Russia's interests going forward.
All right, thank you very much, Doug. We'll, of course, be keeping a very close eye on that in the hours to come.